Good morning, everyone. I hope you all are well. Welcome to another ARA Boston AMA. For those of you who don't know me, I am John Asimacopoulos. I am one of the figure instructors and the anatomy instructor at ARA Boston. We're giving today's AMA a little bit of a framing. We're saying it's more of a figure and anatomy AMA, but of course, I'm happy to answer any other questions as well. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with how we sort of run it, to ask a question, you can either put your hand up on Zoom, or you can write something in the chat, and I'll keep an eye on that as we go. So here we are, open to any questions you all have. Okay, Alberta, I see that you have a question. Please go ahead. Just unmute yourself and go ahead.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm so glad to be here. It's nice to see you. I just
You
wanted
too.
to about cameras. I don't know if you know anything about cameras or if anybody watching knows, because I'm thinking that my phone doesn't take the perfect pictures. It doesn't get the right color, and also it distorts. But maybe that's just the nature of cameras, because it's, I mean, how can you shoot a thing at a thing and get it perfectly right?
Yeah, so you're wondering about just distortion from cameras in general?
Yeah, and is there a camera that I could purchase if it's possible? Yeah, that would, if I later on decide to do, paint flowers or something that's going to die.
Right.
Taking a photo of that and getting the color right is really, I'm interested in that.
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. And a lot of us at the school, we talk about this and we've encountered this as an issue. So the workaround is any camera is okay to use. I mean, I personally recommend that if you're taking a picture to work off of for reference, like if it was flowers, to get an SLR camera, a DSLR camera, the ones that have a little bit of the lens on the front. But even if you're using your iPhone, the big thing is that you just want to give it some distance, because if you're too close, that's where you're going to start to get the distortion on the edges. So if you give it some distance and then zoom up with your lens, you'll get a little less distortion, especially with smaller objects. I mean, with smaller objects, you don't have to worry as much. It's more when you have these larger paintings, like I have a 6-foot painting. I actually haven't photographed it yet, but I anticipate that when I do, I'm going to have to just step back quite far just so to make sure that I don't have any. So that's the first thing. The second thing to do is, let's say it's flowers and you want to make sure the color is correct. Sometimes the camera has a little bit of an issue with getting those exactly to how your eyes see them. So what I would recommend is to do a quick color study or a color sketch. And that can be, I mean, when I do them, I mean, you can take as long as you want with the color sketch, but you can do them pretty quickly if you need to, just to get the basic color, relationships down. And then the photos will fill in the rest, honestly, once you have that. Yeah.
That's great. Okay. I think that's the only question I have right now. I have a couple others, but they don't come to mind right now. So
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes, Nick has posted in the chat here, cameras are way better than phones. Indeed. Although some of the newer phones do have some good capabilities, obviously not the same though. I agree. I agree with that. And a recommendation. Okay, a good entry level is a Canon R10 EOS. Thank you for that, Nick. Right, Gene. Yes, that's correct. Julie does have a very good video on photographing art on the YouTube channel. Thank you for that. I forgot about that. Okay, so Thomas has a question. Could you talk about the biggest, let's see here, biggest surprise of differences between what is in anatomy books and real world bodies like cadavers? I would say the big thing is that the books really focus, well, firstly, because they're 2D, you never get this understanding of the depth and the layering that you see when you're dissecting a cadaver. There are more and more people are making apps that they create 3D models of a body, and so it does allow you to see the layering. And I remember when those first came out, those were really helpful for me to just learning anatomy for the first time. But yeah, I would say that's the big thing, is that you never can get that. I mean, I still have questions that I would want to, or new questions that have come up that I can't really answer unless I go into a dissection room. So that's one thing. And then of course there's besides the layering, is just you're able to remove the skin and to see all the other structures besides muscle. Sometimes you want to understand what the ligaments are doing or what the fat's doing, especially as your anatomical knowledge grows. The dissection room is always going to give you more information. Okay, so Gene has a question. Do you have any suggestions for good studio lighting, specific LED panels or track lighting that you might prefer? So I use I'll use, sometimes I'll just use a regular clamp light. That's what I had used when we were students at the school. All of us were just using clamp lights really to light our casts and our still lifes. And I actually still have one of those set up for my painting. So worst comes to worst, you can do that. As far as LED panels go, I had a few years ago, I had bought a double pack of these. Let me write. I think it's New Weir LED panels. Let me see. I'll write this. And those were good because I could adjust the temperature and the intensity, and they had little barn doors. And they also came with 8-foot tripods to put on them. So, I mean, I usually clamp them to for some way from the ceiling or the rafters at school, but the tripods are helpful too if you don't have that.
What kind of a bulb are you putting in your clamp lights?
In the clamp light, it's let's see. I think it is. Let's see if I can look this up. I had it. Let's see it. I think they're just. I think that was one of the LED bulbs. Let's see here. Yeah, for a while we were using these Hypericon LED bulbs, basically any LED bulb, and I usually have both a cooler, so like 5,000 Kelvin, and a warmer 3,000 Kelvin bulb on hand, or something in between. That's usually good. It doesn't really matter on the company, to be honest, but here I can write that. So anything between 3,000 and 5,000 Kelvin LED bulb, and that should be good. Yeah, for me, the bigger issue I have is the positioning of it, so that I don't get a big fall of light either top down or side to side. And as you work on bigger paintings, that tends to happen. So yeah, just making sure you situate it in the right way. And I would also recommend, maybe it's sort of going on a tangent here, but always take your paintings out into a different lighting, just to make sure things are working in the different light as well. Sometimes we get trapped down this sort of one path with the lighting we're working under, and then sometimes it's too dim, for example, and then when you take it out into a different light, it's completely different. So it's just something to keep an eye on as you work. There's always going to be some problem with the lighting that needs to be tackled. So
Yeah, well, funny thing is, I've been a graphic designer for many, many years, and when
Mhm.
I used to have to go on press OKs, they would put us in a booth with 5000K lights, and to double check the PMS colors were matching exactly. And I always signed off on it. I would say, you know what, we got to take this outside because, like,
Yeah,
literally no one at
right,
home
right,
has one of these booths, so who cares? It just needs to look right.
exactly. Yep,
Mhm.
exactly. In the end, yeah, yeah. Oh, Nick, did you have a question? If you just unmute yourself, then please go ahead.
Um, I didn't quite catch what was being taken outside to look at it outside. A painting to check the color?
Oh, I used to go on press OKs, so it would be a press sheet, a printed like a magazine ad or whatever. Um,
Okay,
so same thing. I was supposed to be okay in color to match and skin tones and all that business. Um,
right,
and if you look at it under 3000K light or 5000K light, it's going to look a little bit different. If you look at it under
right.
just regular incandescent, and then take it outside and you have, but my point was always the customer that's going to get my printed piece is never going to have a 5000K booth to look at it. So it doesn't really, you should look at it under the light that the people are going to see it in, sort of.
Oh, that's what I was going to say. I think it's most important to look at it where it's going to be seen the most.
Right. Yeah.
Yep,
Yeah,
right,
um,
right.
that would make the most sense to me.
Yep.
I used to work by lights that were most common in the galleries that I showed in
Hmm.
for that
Oh, that's a
Mhm.
good idea.
Yeah, yeah,
because the the it doesn't matter what it looks like in my studio if it looks. I mean, of course it does matter, but you'd like it to look good where it's going to live.
Exactly.
right, right, right.
Yeah.
Totally.
Okay.
It's just that when you go to the
Thank
store
you.
now for light bulbs, there's like a crazy array of them.
I know, no, I agree. I agree. I think but yeah, as far yeah, just any LED bulb and just getting a few temperatures. Um, mid may be better if you're lucky, like an in between, like a 4,000 Kelvin, so it's not
What,
overly warm or overly cool.
Mm.
Sorry, go ahead.
when you say LED, you mean a daylight bulb?
Yes, I think
Yeah.
daylight. Yeah.
Because I go as high as 6,500 for
Mhm.
the cool white light, and then I like you say, I have 5 lights. 3 of them are 65, and the other 2 are 45. So
Right, right.
it's a mix, but
Hmm.
um, the 65 is just very clean
Yeah, yep.
to me. So
Yeah,
anyway.
yeah. Okay, so let's see here. Terry has an anatomy question. When you do anatomy studies, which drawing mediums do you use, and how do you approach rendering? I've been studying Leonardo's anatomy drawings lately and noticed he is using a lot of line hatching and ink. Do you have any views on which mediums work well for doing anatomy studies, specifically ink versus graphite? A good question. So personally, it depends on what your goal is with the study, and then in which case I would say there's studies, and then there's more finished studies. Let's say sketchier studies and then more finished studies. I'm more in the sketchier study camp. Not that they're camps, but meaning that for me, the anatomy was always a way that I could understand the body and the figure more clearly. So it was more about me just developing my understanding of anatomy, and so I found faster sketches and not necessarily good looking sketches it wasn't so helpful. It was more about comprehension. It was sort of like I'm taking notes in a lecture. I take notes in the lecture to comprehend what they're saying, and so that I can look at them later. If I don't necessarily find that it would be too helpful to create the best looking notes as I'm writing, as the lecture's speaking. I don't know if that's a good analogy, but I once heard the Russian the Repin Academy in St. Petersburg is world renowned, especially for their anatomy knowledge. They can draw anything in their exams. I think at first year the instructors say draw a baby's mandible from your head. So they really have a deep anatomical knowledge. And I remember reading one time that the instructor said these drawings aren't to show your mother, meaning that we shouldn't get too precious with anatomical drawings if the purpose is just to learn. Now, that being said, I'm not saying that you shouldn't take your time. Like you said, Da Vinci did do these more detailed drawings. There's nothing wrong with that. I personally just use graphite or even pen. The pen is more just to keep me so I don't get too precious with it. It becomes very messy. I've never experimented with ink, so I can't give you any advice on that. But I think it would definitely give you some nice a nice aesthetic, to it if you did some ink first and then either pen on top, charcoal on top. You could do some combining there. Otherwise, though, as far as rendering goes, I'll just hatch with the graphite or the charcoal. Or if you wanted to get a smooth look, you could just go the fill-in route that we usually do with our bargs and casts. But like I said, then you get into more of a finished drawing type of thing, and it's more of a rendering exercise than so much of I'm learning this muscle's location in relation to other muscles, which for me is more important, or learning the form, which for that you could just do a topographical line. So like I said, it sort of all depends on what your goal is with the study. So let's see here. We have any tips for lighting without glare on canvases in studios with low ceiling? Lighting without glare. Yeah, I mean, that's a lot of that is going to be just making sure that your light isn't too direct on the canvas. I would make sure that it's high enough and close to vertical, maybe obviously a little bit back. That's what I found is the best solution there. Yes, go ahead, Nick.
Sorry, I have, like I said, I have lights above me, but I also have a stand on either side of me with more daylight bulbs, and those are really, they're not hot bulbs. So for those side lights where I'm going to be lighting lower parts of a panel, I cover it with a frosted plastic.
Yep, that can also do the trick. Yep.
It cuts the glare tremendously.
For sure.
You just want to make sure that your lights aren't hot, because you don't need a fire while you're working.
Yep.
But it's very doable.
Yeah, thank you for that, Nick. So Thomas had a question about distinguishing the serratus muscles and the ribs, which can be confusing sometimes. I agree with that. Okay, so for those of you who don't know, the serratus muscles, specifically the serratus anterior, are the muscles that are coming from the underside of your scapula, okay, your shoulder blades, and then they're coming forward to your ribs. So you sometimes see them as little digitations right here, but then they can also be confused for the ribs themselves and the external obliques over there. I would say, and they're not really going to show up unless you're usually, you know, raising your arm or something. And the way to distinguish between those two is actually, I would say, the making sure you get the angles right. The angles of the serratus are probably going to be, or they're going to be at a different angle than the ribs, even though they're attaching onto the ribs. They usually have a little bit of a slightly different angle. So that's one thing. And then the second thing is to, they're going to be fuller because they're a muscle and they have a belly, and so they're on top of the rib itself. So they're going to have a longer, if we look at them, let's say in cross section, they're going to have a longer arc to them, a fuller arc than the rib. The rib is pretty flat actually. Okay. And as far as where the serratus usually end, I remember there's a nice, I think maybe Loomis talks about it, Andrew Loomis, that they're usually ending around where the nipple line is if you're sort of going down from that. So they're not coming too far down. Okay. Yeah, no problem, Thomas. My pleasure. Oh, Terry, sorry, I missed your hand up there. Please go ahead.
Oh, no worries. I just had another anatomy question, if I could.
Please, yeah.
In a previous AMA, sorry, my video is being weird. There we go. In a previous AMA, you talked about approaching anatomy study from the context of cycles, as in like you go study arms for a while, then legs, skull, et cetera, and then rinse and repeat. In the course of doing that, I'm curious as to whether you're studying all components of anatomy simultaneously. Like, are you doing, in one of those cycles, for instance, are you focusing on bones, muscle, ligaments simultaneously, or are you saying, okay, arm bones this time, and then in the next cycle I'm going to do muscles for all of these groups? I'm just curious about or both. I'm just curious about how you've approached that.
No, yeah, very good question. As far as teaching it at the school, I've actually done both. I remember when I first started teaching anatomy, it was more I did bones for all of the skeleton, and then I did muscles on top of that. Recently, I've actually changed it to do more of, like, next term, where I'm going to do arms and shoulders. So I'm actually going to do bones first, all the way down to the hand, and then do muscle, but not go to another part. So I guess recently I felt that that's the most helpful because it keeps the relationship going between the bones and the muscles. Sometimes by the time you get back to it for another cycle, by the time you get back to doing, let's say, the upper arm, if you had just done bones, you would have sort of forgotten a lot of it. So yeah, I probably, now that I've done it a few times, recommend doing it like that. You know, focus on your bones, then do a little bit of a, you know, go into muscle and then repeat.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Okay, Jean has a question on approaching galleries. How do you know when you are ready? Trying to overcome some serious imposter syndrome here at times. Should you be trying to build a CV before you approach them? I'm thinking about entering online shows and competitions. So I'm actually right at that point in my career, to be honest. I would say, well, for me, it's been, I'm building up, I want to make sure I have a body of work to approach them with. Because up until now, most of my work I'm working on, because I graduated in 2021. So the series I'm working on now is really the first real representation of my work. Before that, it was more student work, which of course, you know, that's not bad to show a gallery, especially if maybe your personal work, especially in your still lives, does echo what you were doing it, but mine had sort of taken a different direction. So yeah, I would say have a body of work, have something to show them. And then I think the best way, and I've spoken to other artists about this, and they've had success with it, is research what galleries fit your sort of genre, let's say, okay, your niche, and then get a list of those and narrow it down to about 10 galleries, and then reach out to those 10 galleries. And from what I've heard, usually one or two of those usually will bite, so that's sort of what I'm doing right now. I have a couple in mind. I'm trying to add to that list. And I would say you probably want to have a website ready for that, just so that they have something to look at, besides just the work you're going to be sending. And speaking of competitions and online shows, some of these you would need, some of them require artist statements and stuff like that. So I would work on an artist statement. I actually was just working on mine for a grant I applied to, the Green Shields Foundation grant. So I had to work on a proposal, an artist statement. And so even if you're not, I would say, if I'm just open this to a wider sort of amount of people, those who aren't necessarily at the point where they're applying to galleries, it is good to write an artist statement, just because it gets you thinking about what are you trying to do with all of this. Like, it was helpful for me, even if I don't get this grant, it was very helpful for me to think through things. What am I doing? Why am I doing it? Why am I an artist? Why do any of this? Yeah, so that would be my advice there. Of course, going to different galleries to building up relationships if they're local, of course. I mean, obviously some interested in or on the other side of the country, but yeah, that would be my those would be my recommendations right now. Yes, please go ahead, Nick.
Sorry to keep jumping in.
That's
I think
okay.
I might be a little older than some of the folks on here. I would say the first thing is, don't worry about imposter syndrome. They'll let the galleries decide that. It's not your problem. Definitely what you said about finding galleries that are offering what you offer is a smart tactic, because at the end of the day, it's a business. They're going to take your work if they think they can make money. And let's face it, anybody who does this for a living needs to make money in order to keep doing it. But a good way to build a list is to find 10 artists whose work you like, admire, and it's in your genre. Go to their website, see where they show. Now, from 10 artists, you might have 40 galleries, and then do that again, because it's been my experience, and I've been showing in galleries for over 30 years, that you're going to need to submit to 50 to 100 before you find one that will consider you. I've submitted to 50 galleries in one sitting and not received one response. So you have to develop a thick skin, and you have to develop the ability to make it a ritual that you do all the time. It's just a numbers game. It has nothing to do with the quality of one's work. And I also used to set up a calendar where I would set up a follow-up email 2 weeks later, resending the first one. And I've gotten into probably 6 or 7 galleries from the second email because they didn't see the first one. So you just have to stay at it, but never worry about imposter syndrome. As far as building a CV, yeah, absolutely, but don't wait. You don't need to wait. If a gallerist sees work they think they have clients for, they'll help you build the CV, and they're not going to worry about that. Clients aren't asking to see CVs anymore. So it isn't as critically important as it once was. So that's what I was.
So Nick,
Yep.
this is Jean. Thank you. When you send your email, do you ever have, or do you make it a point to attach an image, or is it just? Is that
I always,
much?
I don't attach an image, Gene. I put an image in the body of the email.
Oh, that's what I mean, but you show an image, one image of
Yes,
something.
and my website. But the reason that I put it in the body of the email is why back in the day, I used to send photographs rather than slides, because a photograph would spill out on someone's desk. A
Right.
slide, you have to go look at somehow. So rather than having a busy gallerist not bother opening the attachment, in the body of the email, they can't help but see it.
Right. No, I was actually thinking of going completely old school and sending a postcard.
Yeah,
Yes.
you know,
I don't know.
I did that last year when I was looking for some new galleries. I sent a card with a letter. I don't think that's works.
No. Okay.
It wouldn't hurt you, and it certainly wouldn't hurt you in advance of your email. So send a postcard that you know is going to arrive the week of, and then the following week, send the email.
Mm-hmm.
Because you will have shown them your name once, then your name will show up again. And clearly, it's about getting them to look at a number of your pieces. The best place to do that is a website.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And don't be afraid to resubmit. Resubmit until they tell you to stop. Because what are they going to do? Yell at you?
Right.
So I know what you're talking about with the imposter syndrome. Don't worry about that. That's not your problem. That's their problem.
You know, I did my first commission recently and I agonized over it. I stressed myself out. And then I finally said to myself, look, this guy hired you because you can paint better than he can. Right. So
more importantly, he likes how you paint.
Well, I guess, but yeah, but I can paint better than him, and so he hired me, and so that was that. But I don't know if I don't know if I can do that again.
Now, did you take the commission to paint something you would have painted anyway?
It was a portrait of his dog.
Okay.
So, yeah, probably.
Well, I mean, what would you have done with the commission if he didn't like it?
Kept it.
Okay. Yeah.
You know, it came out fine, I thought.
Yeah.
It was the best I could. It was the best I could do, and you can only do your best, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I take the anxiety out of it for myself by usually narrowing down commissions I accept based on something I would have painted anyway. And if the person doesn't like it, I can send it to one of the galleries I show with. That way I take a deposit. If they don't like it, which has never happened, but if they don't like it, I just give them the deposit back and I've got a place to send the painting because it's what I would have done anyway.
Mm-hmm.
If they're taking me out of my genre, then I tell them up front, I need payment in advance and you're not getting a dime back. Because I don't want to have to worry about a commission while I'm working on it.
Right.
So that's fair. At least I've never had people balk at the idea. But congratulations on your first commission. That's a big thing.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so we have another question here in the chat from Thomas. What would you say are the biggest, sorry, just getting the cursor out of the way here. What would you say are the biggest or most anatomy errors that you see in your students' initial efforts or in works you see online or elsewhere? Very good question. The biggest anatomy errors. Okay, I think there are a few. One is people sometimes don't. They get the proportions. Let's say it's arms. They get the proportions wrong between the upper arm, forearm, and then hand, or even just hand with rest of the body, or foot with rest of the body. So actually, let's just start with the hand. So of course, with something like the proportion of the hand, it's hard sometimes. We have these canons of what hands usually, how they usually relate to the body. So for those of you who don't know, the size of a hand is usually the size of a person's face from their chin to about their widow's peak. So a little bit less than the length of a head. Now, of course, you can only really check this if the hand is in a position that's not foreshortened. If I'm doing something like this, obviously I can't really check it too well. That being said, over time, you do get an understanding of even like this. What I would do is I would say, okay, the fingers are probably going to come out to here. And so I try to take that full length and I'll still do the comparison. So I think it's always relating parts to the whole. So that would be the hand. With feet, people make mistakes there a lot too. And I would say always coming back to the canon, which is that the foot is always a little bit taller than your head. And then back to the relationship I was talking about, there's both the internal relationship between those two, but then also how this arm relates to this arm. A lot of people sometimes mess that up. So if we just start with, let's say, upper arm to forearm, the relationship there is that the humerus bone, the upper arm bone, is a little bit longer than the forearm bones. You usually see that the forearm is about 75-80% the length of the upper arm. If I actually do this, so I'm fully flexing my elbow, you can see my humerus, the top of my humerus is around here. It's usually just a little bit below the top of your shoulder there. And you can see the bottom of the end of my wrist bone here, or my forearm bone rather, sorry, is shorter. You see how it's not going the full length. So it is a little bit shorter. In fact, you can really nicely see that the length of the upper arm, when you compare it to the length of the forearm, it should get you to about mid palm or the knuckles. Okay. So if somebody's in sort of a position like this, you can take the comparison. So you don't always need to remember the relationships. It's just making sure that when you're working from a figure, you're checking that relationship specifically, and then relate it to the other arm or the other leg. If it's a leg against a leg, again, foreshortening sometimes comes into play here, but just making sure that you have harmonization between the two limbs on your drawing or painting. I mean, I see that being a big issue people have, is that they'll focus so much on one side and the other side in isolation that they forget to do the relating between. I mean, and that's, just sort of taking to a larger sort of point of view here. That is the big problem with drawing in general, is that people aren't good, myself included, when I started drawing, is that we're not good at relating parts to whole. We're good at parts, but we're not good at wholes. I mean, there's just something about the human eye there. The other mistake I see people make a lot is with collarbones, with clavicles. They'll either make them too straight as they're going from the pit of the neck here out towards the acromion. So actually, if we just start with that, you want to make sure that your clavicles have a little bit of a curvature to them. If you look at clavicles from a top view, they actually have a sort of a bicycle handle look to them. So if I sort of come down like this, they're coming up and then out. So it's like two little bicycle handles or an archer's bow. That's really, really important. Now, you'll see less of that as the person's looking straight at you. Yes, you'll see a little bit more straightness, but trying to look for a little bit of curvature. The other thing is you want to make sure, and this relates a little bit more towards the integration of anatomical forms in a drawing or a painting, is don't make them, and it's a very delicate line, don't make things like clavicles too sharp or too graphic. Now, you want an element of graphicness because bones, their very nature is that they are graphic. They're a little bit more geometric, while musculature or just any kind of fat is a little smoother. It lends itself more towards a spherical, smoother rendering. And that's a nice thing to show on a body where there are elements where the bone is coming right to the surface, the nose here, forehead, clavicles. You want there to be a little bit more of a sharpness. However, I find a lot of people take that too far, and they either have darker values or too sharp of a line, and it grabs too much attention. Okay, so one thing I always say to people is whenever you're thinking about the body is remember that there's skin on everything, which is sort of like a cloth on everything. So there should be a path that connects all parts, even the sharper elements. Okay. I always, a little test I do, if I take a drawing and I look at it by itself, I'm not looking at the model, and I see where my eye's stopping. If my eye's stopping at somewhere where I don't want it to stop, or at an area that's too noisy, meaning it's graphic or just not filled in well, then I'll soften the edge or whatever it is there. Okay, so that's just a good way to look at things, I would say. Yeah, I would say those are the major ones anatomically. I mean, we could get into some smaller things as well. I suppose I can give one more with eyes, especially if I just run through some of the key shape relationships you need to understand with an eye. So I'm going to come a little closer to the camera here. So the first one is that when you look at an eye, it's not symmetrical. I mean, a lot of you may have heard this, but just important note to make that it's not symmetrical. In fact, the high point of the upper lid is closer to the inside. So let's see if I look at the camera here, the high point of my eyelid should be more around here on the upper lid. And then on the lower lid, it's closer to the outside. So you get this kind of diagonal happening. Okay. Now this actually does change a little bit as you move your eye, because our eye, although the eyeball is very spherical, the cornea does have a little bit of a push out inflation to it. So that does actually affect this high point a little bit. That's a very nuanced point, of course. I mean, and that also, it's if the person is looking up or down or something. But in the regular position, you get that high-low. That's one point. Now, the other one is to note how does the inner meeting point of the eyelids relate to the outer meeting point of the eyelids? It's not going to be symmetrical. It's not going to be on the same horizontal. It's actually going to be a high-low this way, where the outer meeting point of the eyelids is higher than the inner meeting point. Okay. Those are the two big shape things. And then there is, of course, just always remembering that, and this I do see a lot actually, since the eyelid is going over the eyeball, which we said is a spherical form, there is going to be a change in value. So as you're rendering your lid, make sure it's not the same value all the way across it. I find a lot of the times with any form on the body, something we all fall into is that we neglect value changes when something gets smaller. But I always say, imagine if I were to blow this eye up and put that eyelid on it. I mean, it's a very long arc, so you definitely need to make sure that you're changing your values along it. Okay. Same thing on the lower lid. And then the last thing I would say about the lids is that there's this plane, the top plane, let's call it, and then there's the underside plane. So, and the same with the lower lid. You can actually see some light catching. It's where my eyelashes are coming out of. So there's the top plane, and then there's the underside plane. Okay. You can actually find a lot of nice images online if you do planes of the eyelid, things like that. You'll see there's sort of a step down. So that's very, very important. A lot of people I find neglect those planes as well. And the interesting thing is that the eyelid, it's actually the thinnest piece of skin on our body. There's no fat underneath there. So it really is conforming to that spherical form of the eyeball. And that's actually why, if you get hit in the eye, there's tremendous swelling that goes on there because there's no fat to absorb the blood. Okay. Anyway, that's a little bit of a tangent there. But the final thing I'll say about eyes is make sure you don't make the white of the eye, the sclera, too light. That's a huge thing I see every time I teach a portrait class. People forget that the eyeballs are in a socket. I mean, if I can do this and my finger can touch the bone and then up here on my brow and the cheekbone without touching my eye, because it's really pushed in. So, I mean, if you look at my eye on this side, that white of the eye is actually not that white. Look how white my shirt is here catching the light versus the white of the eye. I wouldn't say it's that light anymore because it's in shadow on this side, and then it's also in the socket there. Okay, so just be sensitive to value changes in the eye, I would say. Okay. So you all got a mini eye lecture here. So sorry if I went in too much detail. Hopefully it was helpful to everyone. So yeah, thank you for that, Thomas. Yeah, any other anatomy questions that people have any difficulties with a certain part of the body, feel free. I can talk about those. We can even pull up some images if I need to clear things up. The nose, okay. Alberto asks about the nose. Can you talk about the nose? So, okay. The first thing I would say, the most important, is that the nose is coming off of the face. I mean, that seems like a very clear point, but a lot of people neglect this in the way that they're showing the plane. So we have this plane here, let's just call it the front plane, and then we have the two side planes. Sometimes when you light a portrait, I mean, right now you're actually getting, because the light's coming from my left here, the front plane is actually a little bit darker, but sometimes when you're lighting a portrait, those planes look a little too similar, or between the cheek and this plane here. So, and that's where we sometimes have to take the artistic license, pushing the form a little bit more past what we see or what we can't see. That's where the conceptual comes into play, so that things read as dimensional. Because again, we're trying to sell the illusion of form. You know, I don't challenge the person in front of me who I'm drawing from. I know that they're real, unless you want to get into some philosophical discussions about whether they are or not. But I think they are. But when I'm trying to draw it, I have to sell that illusion. So I need to make sure I push the plane. So what I was saying was just making sure you have a clear differentiation between cheek, side plane, and top plane here. Now, as far as this part of the nose goes, it's a little bit more complicated. Obviously, we have the cartilage down here. So the nasal bone's ending around here, and you can see on me, I actually have quite a clear change. If I could do a profile, you can see mine's ending around here, and then you see the beginning of the cartilage here. And so that comes down, and then we have another piece of cartilage, and then we have what are called the ala, or the wings of the nose. It's actually not cartilage here. This is actually more of a fatty tissue. The big thing I would say here that is difficult for people, because when you're usually drawing from portraiture, if it's from life, there's some distance between you and the model, especially in a class setting. People can't really see how the shadow forms on this part of the nose. So I would say just remember that on most people, this is usually going to be, again, a spherical sort of form. So if the light's coming from above, let's say, the shadow is going to just conform to that sort of semi-lunar sort of shape, that very characteristic shape you see on a sphere. Okay, so without even having to look at it, I mean, this is where the benefit of knowing the anatomy comes, is that you can get a hint of information for, you know, what's in front of you, and then the anatomy fills in the gap. And I'm not talking about idealizing, because then you lose the likeness of the specific sitter, unless of course that's what you're going for. But I'm just talking about looking at, let's to use an analogy, looking at a noisy picture, a grainy picture, and because you have an understanding of, let's say you're looking at a person, you have an understanding of what a person looks like, you can say, oh, that's a person. Well, somebody who maybe doesn't know what a person looks like in the grainy photo wouldn't be able to do that. So the anatomy gives you just it clears up what you're looking at, and so you can distinguish between what maybe is a skin blemish versus a form change. I see that's back to problems I see people have when they're rendering, especially at the smaller level, is that they mistake forms. Like I have a little mole here. Sometimes I've seen people mistake something like that for a form, but it's not because of the underlying anatomy. That's just on the skin there. But that's what I would say as far as the nose goes. It's really the big form. That's what I'm talking about there. And then I have an understanding of this. And I would, to practice drawing noses, I would, if you just put cartilage of the nose, you know, just so you have an understanding of what's going on there, draw a couple of sketches of that, and then pull up some casts, even images, or if you have a cast. I mean, you know, for those of you who don't know, there's the the Michelangelo David nose is a good one just to sit with and render that. Speaking of longer form studies, that would be helpful, I think. Okay. So hopefully that was helpful for you, Alberta. Okay, Terry, I see you have your hand up. Yes, please go ahead.
Thanks. So I'm at a much earlier stage of things in the training, but I'm curious about your views about using different grades of graphite in a drawing. I've noticed that for bargs at the ARA, it's 2B and then sometimes HB if you've got a super heavy hand. And so I'm just curious about the philosophy behind that. And then just if you could just elaborate on that, I'm fascinated. I also just think it's the skill level that would be required to do like super light values in 2B kind of blows my mind. So any information you have on that I'd find that very interesting.
Yeah, thank you for that, Terry. That's a great question. Yeah, so the philosophy behind the 2B is that it teaches the student to build up their pressure sensitivity. Like you said, some people have heavier hands, some are just naturally better at with the lighter touch. I would say I wasn't so great with the lighter end of things, so using the 2B really pushed me towards that end, and just really being more controlled with my hand. So yeah, a lot of it is just teaching the student that, and just to show them the capabilities with that one limitation there, really. I mean, that kind of goes to our philosophy later with paint too, where we're working in limited palettes too, to push the capability, see what you can do with the 2B. And so yes, I mean, if you were using like a 6B, it would be easier to get to a darker dark, but the 2B also, if we're talking about the dark specifically, it does also teach you the patience, because you have to build up the darks. If you go straight to it, it will sort of burnish the paper. You'll get too much of a shine to your graphite. But if you work it in layers slowly, then you get less of a shine, less of a sheen to that graphite. So yeah, I would say it's teaching you patience, but also teaching you just sensitivity in the light and darks as well. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm actually going to see if I can find the planes of the eye I was mentioning. If feel free to keep asking questions. I'm just between questions. If people are interested, I can pull it up. Okay, so let me just share my screen here. Actually, let's see if this works. Can everybody see this? Is that everybody's screen? Seeing the eye there?
Yeah, it looks good.
Excellent. Thank you.
Where is that from?
So this is from a Russian book. I have this image too. I just found it on. Don't even know what book it is. I actually the image I have is from the actual drawing itself. It seems like they just cropped this and put it into the book, but I don't have anything more than that. I just got it online, but I just thought it was a really nice representation. I'm assuming it's from a cast that the person drew it from, and then they just made a more, let's call it structural or architectural rendering of the eye. But I mean, you can really nicely see if we just look at this part, you can see there's that sphere of the eyeball starting from that and then putting the lids on top of that. So firstly, those steps I was talking about, you can see that front plane, which is a little bit lighter, and then we have that down plane going in, that sort of decline going inwards, which is obviously in shadow here because the light's above. And then you even see that cast shadow on the eyeball itself. That also is the as an umbrella on part of the eyeball. So you would get a darker value here, unless light is coming directly from the front, which is usually not the case. And then again, you get that nice topographical line showing the spherical nature of the eyeball, side to side, top down, and then we reach another two planes for the lower lids there, okay? And just, yeah, look at and this is where perspective comes into play a little bit. Look at how much that lid is really wrapping around that eyeball there versus the lower lid. The upper lid is a longer trajectory, so it has more form to wrap around, so it's more arcing, let's say, okay? And then coming to the one on the top left here, look at how they've divided these planes of this lower lid. This is a brighter one because of the light from the left, clearly. And then it's a little bit darker and darkest right here. So yeah, it's just, again, just remembering to basically render every form and having an understanding of what those forms are, okay? Does anybody else have any other questions about any quality they're having difficulty in? We have another question here, okay, from Terry. Please go ahead, Terry.
Thanks. I just wanted to pick up on something you said earlier about you graduated the program in, was it 2021?
Yes.
And so now, like, you're in that stage of sort of making your own work and getting your first couple of collections together and whatnot. I'm just wondering if you can share some of your experiences from transitioning out of like that academic training mode into creating your own work mode, and some of the I guess challenges might be a good word for it, but just some of the differences and some of the things you're having to tackle going from like a very circumscribed, here's assignment number 1 through 6, and to like stepping out on your own. And I've heard that can be a challenging time for artists post atelier training. So I'd welcome your insights on that.
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, I find, and so I mean, there are a few things. One of them was, yeah, just sort of learning to change lanes and realize that, now it's about creating the art, not necessarily about the technique part. I mean, the technique should become more intuitive now, and then you're just working on top of that. I mean, I was talking with one of my friends, another student who went to ARA, and we were talking about how we still, even though we've been out of school for a while now, and thank you, Tracy, see you later. Even though we've been out of school for a while, we still feel sort of this anxiety when sometimes we're not rendering something as much as we should or making it as real as we could in a painting. So yeah, trying to break free sort of the shackles of the being too much about technique and the faithfulness to what you're painting, let's say, or to people. I think that, I mean, and I would say this is something that you see in society in general. I mean, I see it when I watch a movie, and maybe I'm generalizing, but we're sort of obsessed with realness. You go with somebody to the movies and people start talking about it was the CGI, not so real. It could be better, but you look at movies back in the day and it was sort of obvious when things were and weren't. I don't think that was as much of a concern. So yeah, that's definitely been something that's been challenging to let go more and more. That's sort of what I'm saying. Let go of what's of ultimate concern. And that's been helpful more and more, that I'm asking myself, there's a hierarchy of things that I care about. There are the elements of the painting, and then there's what the painting is pointing towards, and that these elements should be in service to the painting as a whole, to the message or whatever it is. I'm painting, my current series is a story. So I don't want it to be just about the elements. I wouldn't want somebody to just look at it and be, oh, this looks so real. Oh, look at this texture, and then leave it at that. I mean, I want that as well. That's entertaining. That's nice. But I want that to help the person go into the painting and then inform what the larger idea or something is with that. Because I mean, in the atelier training, you're just learning more how to get the cohesion with the values, to get the drawing right, learn these techniques, how to make these kinds of textures. Of course, near the end, it is the still lives. You do get to spread your wings a little bit and get into more of a narrative, let's say, or playing with things. But yeah, so that was definitely one thing. The other was, at least for me, because I am more concerned with let's call it explicit narrative. I had to think about what to paint, and that was a very difficult question for me. And so there was a lot of time between, let's say, 2021 and 2020. I guess it was about a year's worth of just thinking about, writing a lot, asking yourself certain questions of, again, why am I an artist? Why am I doing this? What do I need from this art? What might other people want or need? And then really, again, thinking about a hierarchy, like, because I'm the type of person that I walk outside and I could find one leaf very interesting and I could paint that. But there are so many instances of that every day. How do I work through that sea of salience, I would call it, the salience being the things that are striking to me, everything's striking to me. How do I figure out what's most striking so that I can then choose that, like pick my lane? Otherwise, it just becomes it's combinatorially explosive. There's just an infinite amount of options and I don't know what to do and I'm overwhelmed. But for me, I had to figure out what was the thing that was most important to me. And I sort of narrowed that down and over time, and that's sort of where the direction is heading. And now I find that by narrowing it down, that's beginning to influence how I'm painting as well. So that was dealing more with the why. Now I'm understanding how the how should influence the why, meaning the style or whatever. And I'm noticing I am leaning more towards, I wouldn't call it non-representational, but I'm leaning more towards a stylized style where it's not so much about being too real. It's more, again, about the elements pointing towards. So it's sort of like an icon. I like to say to people, for me personally, I think of myself as painting icons, where an icon is more of a, if you look at like Byzantine icons, they're very weird looking. I mean, you look at their faces and stuff. I mean, I grew up in Greece, so I used to look at them a lot, and you get used to it, but they are odd looking. And then you realize that the point isn't for them to be too real, because it's not supposed to be an idol. That thing should become the thing of focus. It's more what the icon is pointing toward. So I kind of like to think of my paintings like that. And that's just me, obviously. That's it's very, bespoke to John. But yeah, I would say those are kind of some of the things I've been dealing with. So yeah, thank you. That's a good question.
No, thank you. That was a really insightful answer, because like what I took from that is like in my like earlier stages, it's okay, I want to paint this, and then you go to do it and it's like, wow, I do not have the skills to pull this off whatsoever. But
Yeah.
in the course, like the things that you were working through and interrogating, it was more like subject matter and philosophical. I didn't hear you say anything like, damn it, I didn't know how to do this. And like that to me, like is what I see as the value of atelier training, is it's going to give you the craft. And then
Totally.
when
Yeah.
when you ask those tough questions, you're going to go to your easel and at least like have the foundational skills to realize what you're thinking. So no, thank you. That was really encouraging.
Yeah, you're welcome. No, it's true. And I sometimes take it for granted. I mean, because you do hear a lot of people talking about, what are you painting and all this stuff. But I think without the fundamental understanding of the structure of how to paint, I wouldn't be able to do any, I wouldn't be able to do it. I mean, I also play music, so I can use that as an analogy, that without an understanding of scales and chords and how they fit together, I think, and I do have gaps in those things. Up until this point, I would call myself maybe an intermediate sort of guitar player. I am frustrated more so by those gaps than trying to make the music I want to make. I mean, and there are a lot of people can get into the philosophical things of this, like, oh, you can always make music, and maybe, but I don't think most people need some sort of way to navigate things. So yeah, the craft is 100% important. I wouldn't do it differently. The atelier training teaches you the craft, and it gave me all of that. So now that I can focus on all these other things. Yeah. So I just wanted to make that clear as well. So thank you for that. Okay, Gilberto has a question. I will start my class on Wednesday with Eric. I know I will need to provide pictures of my exercises. The question is, what is the recommended JPEG size to be uploaded? That is a good question, Gilberto. I don't actually know the answer to that. I honestly think once you take the picture and then you just put it into the drive folder, because the drive folder can, has a very large size, I don't think you need to worry about it. I think you just upload it, and if there are any issues, Eric will let you know, and you'll adjust it. So yeah, no, I don't have the specific answer, but I wouldn't worry. Enjoy the rest of your day, Nick. Thank you. So I don't know how, well, you can unmute yourselves. I'd be totally fine with that. But I'm just saying, because I'm going to ask a question to everyone. How many of you are in the online program with Eric? Quite a few of you. Okay, perfect.
Yeah, I have some questions about that.
Yes, please go ahead, Alberta.
It's in my hand. Well, I'm 66, so I feel that yeah, I'm such a I didn't grow up with that computer thing, and also my mode of doing things is always by hand, always. Like, sort of in my whole thing is to sort of resist it, even though I don't think I'm doing that. I am doing it, and I'm having a hard time with that, because I can tell you right now, I think Eric Johnson has an amazing mind. And I love what's happened to me because I've been able to take his classes. Now I just imagine like if it would be even more beneficial to go in person, and if there would ever be a time when the school would ever have like opportunity for people that are offline to just come in and online to come in and be in a class or just kind of hang out there and see people do. Is that, monkey see, monkey do, right?
Say that last part again.
Monkey see, monkey do.
Yeah.
So that's, I guess I just wanted to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. And so are you local, Alberta?
Yeah. Gloucester.
Okay. Yeah, no, we've actually had one specific example. You probably met Jessica online. I don't know if you've met her. She
No.
does the online. But she's done 2 stints where she came in person and stayed for 2 terms actually. And she's going to be doing the same in the fall. So I don't know if you're planning on that kind of thing or wanted to do that kind of thing, but to just come in and hang out, absolutely. I mean, it's the same school. I mean, the online,
right.
So feel free. Don't feel like you can't. You're always welcome to come.
The parking is expensive.
Yeah. I know. I understand. I understand that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, you're in Gloucester. Obviously, it's more convenient to do the online. I also understand that. Yeah.
Would there ever be, do you think, a thing where I could come in one of the days and do 2 of the days online? But that would be a different teacher, right?
It would be a different teacher, but yeah, I don't think there's a problem. I think we actually had a few students doing that at one point.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know if she's still taking classes, but Sabina, I definitely remember, I think it was last year, she was doing figure in person, but she was doing Barg online. So yes, feel free. I mean, if you want to do that, I mean, just reach out to Julie or even just sign up. I mean, I don't think you even have to, I mean, you let us know, but it's not an issue is what I'm saying.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Yeah. I'm so happy to be doing the Barg classes, but I'll tell you, it's not easy. And I guess
I hear you.
That's where the fruit is, right?
Yep, exactly. I do think so. Yeah. Having some resistance to push against is where the change happens.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, totally.
Okay,
yeah, so just keep going. Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, good. So you're in New Mexico. Okay. And Dale, good to hear from you here. So you're going to start in September, Dale?
Yeah, planning on it.
Okay. What are you going to be? What project are you going to be working on?
Let's see. I have to pay for the classes first, but I think it's going to be finishing up my tenebrism that I didn't finish last year.
Okay, yeah.
Because of my back. So
yeah, you started it though. Yeah, but you started though. It was the one you started, right? Was that the first still life?
that was the first still life.
That was the first still life. Okay.
Yes, sir. So hopefully I can get back on track with that.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. No, that would be awesome. Please go ahead, Terry.
Thanks. I'm curious about your views on sort of a sweet spot for a duration of a studio session. I know sometimes the exigencies of life sort of stipulate this for us, but I'm just in my other world, my day job is as a lawyer, so I think unnaturally obsessed with time. But like there's sort of a ceiling in terms of when your brain can be really productive and when you can do that sort of deep work where you're fully engaged before your mind starts to wander. In my case, my hand is not as reliable as it is. And so I'm just curious, in the course of your experience, having gone through an Atelier program and now as an instructor, what you sort of conceptualize that as, and if it's different for drawing or painting.
Yeah. So just from let's start from like a logistical perspective. I would say painting does need a little bit more time, because with the painting, there's the whole prepping before you even start painting, because you have to mix. That usually takes some time, and then you paint, obviously, and then there's the end of the session where you have to clean your brushes. Graphite or drawing is just good because you just go in, start, go out. You don't have to worry about anything. So logistically, drawing can be a really short amount of time. But I mean, you're asking more from, I suppose, from from a flow perspective, like how much can your mind sort of tolerate? I would say it's dependent on the student. And if I just take myself, for example, it's changed over the years. There were some times where a lot of it is how much of a flow state you enter into. If you're in the zone, I can go for, many hours sort of straight, let's like say 4 hours, and then I take a break. But not recently, not as much. I think what I'm painting is a little bit harder. So it's, I do actually have to take more breaks. I would say, I'm sure you probably don't have a problem with this. I mean, just be disciplined with, allocate the time, and then whenever you actually need a break, just take a breather, sit down. That's sort of what I've found recently. I'm trying to push it to be a little bit more continuous. There's something to say about how you're painting there too that comes into play, I would say. Drawing, I would say though, drawing, it's easier to get into a flow state. There's less to juggle with drawing. You said you're more at the beginning, right, of the program. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm at the sort of graphite post-barg stage a little bit. I had a lot of years, like not a lot, like 5 or 6 of painting and drawing before, and realized this isn't going to go well until I actually know how to draw. So I kind of reset and started from scratch. And so that's kind of the stage of things that I'm at now. But I've noticed, because like the drawing is just so much more intensive, and like after like I can spend like 8 hours rendering, but like in terms of like actual drawing or blocking, like I just find that a lot more cognitively demanding. And after a certain point of time,
for sure,
that sort of like 2 or 3 hour mark, I'm like, okay, these lines are gonna go better tomorrow after a break. And so I was just curious about like other people's experience in terms of that sort of like sweet spot, and also the benefits of like I'm not seeing a lot of benefit in sort of pushing beyond that. If I start to notice accuracy waning, I'm more inclined to kind of shift and go do something else that doesn't require that same level of cognition. So I was just curious about your perspective about that as someone who like trains people in the classical method.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. When you're doing sort of more proportional drawing, like trying to figure out like a construct or something, it's definitely more demanding. And especially with cast, I remember myself getting very, very frustrated in those early stages. And I just needed the break. And like you said, you call it a day, or just give yourself the break before going back. The 3 hours, I would say, it's kind of good that we have the 3-hour sessions morning and afternoon, and I think that works well. And I've sort of kept that for my own personal practice too. I don't do as much of the construct stuff. When I'm in the fig room, I do, but there's not as much of the working through the drawing stuff for me anymore. Because sometimes what I'll do is I'll just transfer from a photo I'm working from, because I've sort of worked from reference now, so it's less taxing in that sense. But definitely the beginnings of a drawing or painting have that. So I agree with you. I'm with you with I have the same perspective basically. Yeah.
I got some thoughts if you want to hear them.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, in the book, this is directly to the question I was asked. In the book, the talent code, I believe they said that there's about 3 hours or so of a day that a person can really be deeply focused, that super deep dive and blocking everything out, and that
Right.
there's limits to what the human mind can do. I
Yeah.
for myself, when I know that I do need to spend hours, a full day, what works for me is to be kind of organized, almost like checklist, and switch from thing to thing so I can continue to look at the very same subject, but through different filters, rather than just generally, flogging it hour after hour, saying, what's wrong with this? What's wrong with this? Now I'm looking at drawing. Now I'm looking at form. Now I'm looking at color. Now I'm looking for slants, very specific. And then I found that was more refreshing, that I wasn't just wringing my hands and just, hey, what needs to be fixed next? And then I was able to, go longer. But yeah, there is this was they were talking about a music school up in New York where the students were really intensely, practicing things, and found they hit a ceiling where it wasn't as productive after a while.
Mm-hmm. Yep. No, I totally agree with that. I mean, we always tell figure especially, I would say, when I was a student and now that I'm teaching it, you definitely see it being way more taxing after about even 5 hours. And that's 5 hours with the model break. So it probably ends up being less for the student. But yeah, you see that they're pretty drained. We've actually, I've started teaching anatomy at the end of the day now. And some people were saying how it definitely is harder to concentrate at the end of the day because they've gone through all of that. It's just intense drawing with the figure. And even for myself, I remember when I was a student, we would have a figure day, and then we usually wouldn't work on anything, let's call it high risk, maybe like on a cast or something like that. We would probably just fill in on our figures or work on the background because it was just low energy. So yeah. Okay, so Alberta has a question. Do you have any suggestions for exercises that help with becoming better at seeing form? A lot of that, I would say, is, I mean, I would say our method, really doing bargs, doing casts, doing figure, because a lot of the scene form part is just becoming more sensitive to value changes. And I find that going through this process of just really putting yourself in that mindset, in that frame of mind, to where you're looking for changes in value, becoming more, and you become more sensitive. I mean, it's the same with color. I remember when I first started doing cast painting, I couldn't see the color. I mean, people would point it out to me, and it was very difficult for me to see it. But just through that process of trying to find hints of the color in the cast, my eye became more sensitive. So I think just going through the exercises and, let's say you're rendering a nose, looking for the value differences and making sure they relate to each other because it's all relational. That process will make you better at seeing form. Now, from an anatomical perspective, if we're talking about something like a nose, drawing noses and having an understanding of the underlying structure, or something like an eye, like we discussed, or the forehead, what are the planes of this part of the body? That'll also give you a better understanding of, that'll help you see the form, because you'll have a map as to what you expect the values to be doing. Let's say if the light's coming from the top left here, and so then it'll just be easier to notice the changes. Or else you have to put your eye has to go into overdrive to really see, which it can do. I mean, like I said, the method does give us that sensitivity, but the anatomy can help that. So hopefully that that answers your question. I would say, I guess, to give a more specific answer beside whatever you're doing through school, is to just keep drawing. Get a good reference photo of a figure or cast, or if you can get to an actual live session, and just keep drawing. Try to keep rendering. It'll help you see form better. You'll have an understanding of the logic that goes into it, the light logic we call it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Hi, I'm Jennifer. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can, Jennifer. Please go
Oh,
ahead.
hi. Hi, yeah, thanks
Hi.
for taking my question. I am I'm just sort of lurking today, interested
Mm-hmm.
in ARA, and I have had, some training years and years ago. I went to college for art school, but now I'm interested in some real classical training. And I
Mm-hmm.
didn't really get the basics of drawing, any of that. So if I was to start with ARA, where do people start? Is it the bark drawings? Just to get a good foundation of drawing?
Yeah, so it's and just to confirm, would you come in person or would you do online, or what were you?
I probably have to do online.
Okay.
I mean, I'm in Massachusetts, but I'm up by Newburyport area,
Okay.
and
Yeah, understandable.
logistically, with the family style I've got right now, I'm still pretty
Yeah,
limited.
yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. No, I understand. Yeah, so you would start with Bargs, and then probably, if you could, to do the figure day as well, because the online has both. I mean, not to say you have to. The Barg works well too, but yeah, the Barg really just addresses those fundamentals. I mean, right from how to sharpen your pencil the way we do, how to hold the pencil, how to make strokes, and then getting into how to measure just in a very simplified one-to-one manner, like we do with the Bargs, and then eventually getting into how to render, what value is, which you probably are aware of all these things for going to art school, but yeah, just pushing them further.
Okay.
And then the figure is just sort of applying a lot of that to the figure. It's just teaching you more of a comparative measurement system, where with the Barg we're working one-to-one, so you can direct comparison. But with the figure, because the figures, the drawings are usually at a different size than our drawings, you have to do what's called comparative measurement, where you have to take like the length of the head and compare it to the foot on the model, and then compare that on your drawing. So it's a relationship against relationship. But so it would teach you that. And then it's just all the same ideas with the value too. So yeah, anything you can do, even if it's just one
All right.
session in the morning, yeah, I think it'd be really helpful.
Would it be any different if I could get in person there, or would it be the same kind of structure?
Same structure. The only difference is that for the figure part of the program, you would be able to work from a live model. So it's more challenging, but there are benefits to it, because you learn how to deal with the movement of the model. And I would say sometimes it makes it actually, well, I guess you could look at it from both sides, that it makes it sometimes a little bit easier to judge values in real life, but also more challenging at the beginning than a photo does, because the photo kind of sort of gives you it sort of edited things for you. The photo from life, you haven't done the editing yet, so you have to learn how to do that. So it's definitely helpful. I think if you could, it would probably be good every so often, try to get a live figure session. I think it would be helpful.
Okay.
But sorry, just one
Yeah.
last thing, and sorry to interrupt you.
No worries.
That working online with the figure, let's say you're getting all of the methodology, you're getting all that. So when it would be time for you to get into a live figure situation, everything would just cleanly apply. Like it's not, so yeah.
Oh, nice. All right. And then the logistics, I could, the parking and all that. I heard someone talking about the parking, all that could be worked out. I call the school and figure that out. Yeah.
Yeah. There are a bunch of
All online.
parking lots. Yeah, there are a bunch of parking lots. There's right above South Station. There's one. It's a little bit more pricey during the week. Some people do try to do the street parking, but you have to worry about the meter and everything. But yeah, it's definitely doable. A lot of
Okay.
people do it. Yeah.
Yeah, great, thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Hi, it's Alberta again. Tell me,
Mhm.
now the barg thing, that goes for like a while till you're done with it. And the figure is another thing. They're two different things, or do you put them together?
We consider them sort of two concurrent streams of, yeah, you're sort of, ideally you'd want to do both at the same time because they inform each other, and you sort of try to keep them at the same level. Like you wouldn't go into painting the figure in before you're painting in the bar cast still life.
Right,
path.
okay. So
Yeah.
if I took two barg classes during the week in the morning, could I come in there to do a figure class during the day on a Wednesday?
Yeah, I think yeah, Wednesday. I think that would be fine. Yeah, because that's what most people do in person. They'll do yeah, like two sessions of bar, 2 days of barg, and then they'll come for my Wednesday part-time class. Yeah, so that's fine. Yeah, I think that would work out nicely if you could do that.
Okay. All right, thanks.
You're welcome. No problem. Oh, sorry, Thomas. I didn't realize you asked me a question about the humorous that I didn't see here. Okay, so let's see. How far do you think the humerus has to abduct before the scapula gets involved and has to rotate? Some books say 90 degrees, but my shoulders, the doctor says it have it at 60 degrees. Might it be different on different people due to the protrusions on the head of the humerus? Okay, so Thomas's question is, well, I guess so you're all understanding what's happening. He's asking about how the scapular, the shoulder blade, moves as the humerus, the upper arm bone, abducts. So abduction is when, if, you think about, this is the center line, and abduction is when things are, I always think about abduction. They're taken away by the aliens or whatever. You're taken away from the center. And then adduction, adduction is adding it back. Okay, so that's the movement. So what we're asking is, when you abduct your humerus, there's a certain point where your scapula, because that's what your humerus is articulating with. It's articulating with the scapula. At what point does the scapula, because if you think about your scapulas on the back here, they have to rotate at a certain point so that your arm can keep going up. If it didn't rotate, what would happen is you would probably not be able to go past this point because the humerus would be hitting what's called the acromion. I'm actually going to pull up a picture so that we can make this. I'm just saying words without any visual. Let's see here. Shoulder joint. Yeah, yeah. Let's, So, yeah, as the humerus were to come up like this, eventually the scapula is going to have to move, or else the humerus is just going to hit this part of the scapula, which is called the acromion. That's actually the outer part of your shoulder. You can see it again right here. It sort of acts as an umbrella over part of the humerus there. Yeah, so Thomas's question was that most books say around the 90-degree point, so meaning where the humerus is sort of horizontal here is when it starts to turn, but his doctor says that his happens a little earlier, more like 60 degrees. Yeah, so Thomas, my answer, I don't have a specific angle. I would say I've noticed what you're saying, that it's not always at 90 degrees, that sometimes it does happen earlier. And I would say, yeah, it probably depends on a couple of things. One may actually be the gap between the acromion and the humerus, which, by the way, just as a side note to be aware of, when you look at books and when you look at skeletons that they have for teaching purposes, the gap is way too wide. This gap right here I'm talking about between the humerus and the top of the acromion there. And just to show that on myself here, you know how earlier I was saying that the humerus ends up being pretty much the top of it's like right about there, if that's the top of the shoulder. I know that because that gap is so small. I think it's between, I have to get this right now, 8 millimeters and 12 millimeters. I think I'm right with that number. Meaning, but I mean, for those of you who, I should do the conversion for those of you who don't know metric here. So 12 millimeters in inches. So that's about 0.4 of an inch. The point being, though, that a lot of these drawings make that gap too large, and that would mean your shoulder's dislocated, which would be very unpleasant. So ignore the gap you see in the books and the actual skeleton. It's actually very small. If you look up X-ray of humerus, you'll be able to see how small the gap is. Anyway, so yes, Thomas, I think there's a range that's in short, but I can't tell you what the range is exactly. Okay. No worries, Thomas. Thank you. Okay, so we have Thomas is asking, how deep do you think an artist's organs, bones, tendons? Let's put it this way. For myself, because I teach it and I use it when I paint, I've actually, and I would say teaching is where you really need to, that's where you actually need to know what you're talking about. My point in saying that is that I've lost my understanding of organ anatomy I used to know. Don't think it's as necessary. I don't end up, of course, I mean, there is a turnover rate with the students I teach, so I maybe never can get as deep, but yeah, I don't think you would need to go into that. I think there are other things that you would need to master before you even start to think about organs. I mean, recognizing that they're there, yeah, but they're not really influencing surface form that much. So yeah, I would say no. Mainly just, yeah, bones, muscle, tendon. Fat is a big one though, especially on the face, understanding the fat pads. And that's actually something which most books do not discuss. But there, a shout out to Anatomy for Sculptors, it's called. That's the sort of their brand name at this point. They have a couple of books on head and neck, which are really, really good because they talk about the fat pads and where they are, where they're most prominent, and how they change over time. Because like I said, books mainly just focus, at least for the face, they just focus on bones and muscle. The problem with the face is that although the bones are very prominent, the muscles don't really create that much of a form impact. I mean, a perfect example is this frontalis muscle here, which helps us raise our brow. It's very, very thin. I mean, if you pinch your skin up here, you can't actually, I mean, it's not like your bicep where you can grab a whole piece there. They're very, very thin. It's more the fat pads, like on the cheek here. It's very important to understand what's happening at the bony level, to understand that the muscle acts more like a tarp. It connects this point to this point, and then there's a fat pad on top and actually below that as well, which adds more of that tissue there. Okay, so yeah. And speaking of book recommendations, or books, and I can give a couple of recommendations for people. I would say you definitely want to get Artistic Anatomy by Paul Richet. That's been edited by Robert Beverly Hale. It's a red book. I would say that's a really good book for copying the plates at the back of the book. That's sort of where I learned how to draw bones, understand their shape, is I would just copy those plates. It's good for muscles too, don't get me wrong, but I really like the bones. But yeah, so just for the plates, that's a really good book. For information, I would recommend, and I should put these in the chat so you don't have to remember them all here. So we have, yes, also Bomis, yes, so we will mention that as well. Thomas, thank you. It's a very good book. So we have Artistic Anatomy by Paul Richet. Then we have Anatomy for Artists, The Elements of Form by Elliot Goldfinger. Excellent name for all you James Bond fans out there. That's a really good book for the information because it's very concise, but it basically has all the information you need to know. Like if we were talking about the humorous, you just look up the humorous. It basically has one page. You just read that, you get all the information you need pretty much. And also very nice for when it talks about the muscles, is that it has a really nice progression of showing the origin, the start, endpoint, the origin, insertion on the bone. Then it shows the muscle by itself, then in context, and then on a live person, all in a row. So very good in that sense. There's if you want a more 3D sort of layered understanding of the body, there are two Italian, Struttura Uomo, they're called, The Structure of Man, Volume 1 and 2. Those are kind of are working off of this idea of plastic anatomy that Gottfried Bomis, which Thomas had mentioned. I'll write that. And actually, the book was just translated in English a number of years ago. So that's, I think, a Complete Anatomy for Artists, I think it's called. Also a very good book. Again, these books are nice because they break out of that mold of your usual front, back, side views, and they get into more three-dimensional views of understanding the form and layering. So really nice to copy from. Once you sort of done a little bit of the more 2D, you've gotten the 4 views under your belt. Yeah, I would say those are good starting points for anatomy books.
So do you just get a copy of that and then put it just the way you do the BARG on top of your board right next to the paper and go for it that way?
Yeah, so you can do it like that. Or you can just, I mean, you can even have it on your screen, because some of these you can find online, or just put it in front of you and then just copy it. Because again, it doesn't have to be direct. Like I was saying, it can be more sketchy. I mean, you still, you want it to have some accuracy, but yeah. I mean, the Barg way is not bad though. That's how I actually used to do it. What I would actually, I kind of destroyed my artistic anatomy book because I took off the binding and I would just take the sheet itself and put it on my board. And so
Yeah.
I just had a direct. I actually like that better for drawing. But yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. I also would recommend to everyone, just as far as learning goes, I mean, there's one thing to understand the shapes and everything that just comes from drawing it, but and I've sort of had to tackle this as an instructor with anatomy, that there is a level of vocabulary which kind of acts as a it's hard to understand things without it, but it also keeps people out because they know that they have to learn all these new names and this whole naming nomenclature and everything. I would say some of it is necessary because eventually you can't really refer to things if you don't have some understanding. I mean, there are different arguments about that, but I would say that the gold figure kind of deals with that, going through those. Eventually, just by the repetition of looking through the pages, you'll get an understanding of what the names are and what you need to understand. So that's one thing. And then what was I going to say? To understand the layering, like I mentioned earlier, I think get one of there are a lot of free 3D anatomy apps, 3D anatomy atlases. I have Complete Anatomy on my phone, actually. That one there may be a subscription, unfortunately, for that now, but it used to be free. But there are a number of other ones. If you just do a 3D anatomy atlas on your phone or iPad or whatever, really good because you can just rotate the figure and add or subtract muscles so you can see the layering and how they relate to each other. You can't beat that. I mean, it's a really good exercise or a really good app. Yeah, I think that's. Oh, you also did mention Ted Seth Jacobs, Thomas. Yeah, Ted Seth Jacobs was a really good artist, and his student, one of his students, Anthony Ryder, wrote a really nice book on figure drawing, Complete Guide to Figure Drawing, which is, I find, a really good book on learning how to draw with your eye, more with your eye, and like what tools you can use with just your eye instead of measuring. Obviously, we teach measuring at the school, but teaching you how to draw with your eye, especially that first chapter, I think it is very, very helpful. But yeah, Ted Seth Jacobs, all his books are very good. Drawing with an Open Mind and Light for Artists. How, speaking of teaching how to see form, and just sort of really good for that. He was all about that sensitivity to what's in front of you.
Could you repeat the last couple of book suggestions that you
Yeah,
mentioned,
sorry.
please?
Let me. I'm going to write them in the chat here. So there's Ted Seth Jacobs. There's Drawing with an Open Mind. Then there was, I think it's called Light for Artists. If you just look for the one on light. And then there's Anthony Ryder. That was the one that has the Drawing by Eye chapter and other things too. I mean, it's not just on the Anthony Ryder. That's Complete Guide to Figure Drawing, I think. Yes, I have heard of the anatomy one. I do have it, Thomas. I haven't looked at it too much, but yes, right. So Thomas is saying that Ted Seth Jacobs did have an anatomy. I think it's Structure of Human or something, Ted Seth Jacobs. Let me look it up. And then I do want to mention that point you just brought up here, Thomas. Let me just find this name, Ted Seth Jacobs. Structure. Dictionary of Human Form. That's what it is. Okay, Dictionary of Human Form. Yeah, because I haven't looked at it in detail or drawn from it in detail really, but his big thing was that he didn't like, kind of back to this idea I was saying about parts and the whole. He didn't like how we've separated. We've said, this is the forearm, this is the wrist, this is the hand, that they're interconnected, which is it's a very good point. I mean, we need to look at things maybe a little bit more holistically than sort of that sort of mechanical separation. So yeah, definitely, I think that's another good book to add to the list for sure. Yeah, his whole philosophy is very interesting. No worries, Jennifer. So this talking about hands and feet, I thought I might, just to give you some anatomy tips as of, so we're going over the eye and the nose. I just made a social media post for the school. Actually, it'll probably come out in September on feet. And just to end here, we can give you a little form of the foot, quick tips and a little lesson here, which is that here. I'm going to share my screen. Let's see here. Okay. Oh, hopefully you can all see this. So the thing about the foot is that we have two arches, which I think a lot of us think about the foot as a very symmetrical sort of form, but we have a transverse arch, which is the arch going side to side, and then we have a longitudinal. The arch is going, back to front, front to back, and you can clearly see it right here. Okay, so those are really important when thinking about the form of a foot, especially when you're rendering a figure or a live model, you're doing a figure drawing. Sometimes it's hard to see the form of the foot, so it's very helpful to have the anatomical knowledge to build that form so they don't look flat. And so here's the thing I want to bring up is that when you're looking at this transverse arch, notice how high point is closer to, let me bring the next image here. Yes, so the high point is actually closer to the big or the second toe, meaning that this plane here that goes, let me draw it, the plane that goes from the inside peak is steeper and shorter than this plane here that's longer and shallower. So it means that the transverse arch is not symmetrical, that in fact the high point is closer to the left here. Because so here what I'm doing is I'm shining a light from the right side, and that's really showing that because the terminator line, or the line where the last point the light can hit is further to the left there. Okay, so that means that you can render this without even looking at a foot to an extent, like just to knowing that this high point exists like this. And then of course it does get a little bit flatter as you come towards the toes there. Okay, but yeah, that's a key thing with feet to keep in mind. Okay, so I just wanted to bring that up. Okay, so Terry has a question. Who are your favorite artists to do master copies of for anatomy drawing? A very good question. Let's see. I mean, Da Vinci definitely it, when I first sort of started, I did some. Then Rubens has some good ones that I like doing. But after that, I mean, I like copying. It was more copying from the plates of books, like all these books I was mentioning. I did a lot. I did more of that than what I did more so with master copies or any figure drawing was I did layovers where I would put tracing paper or a sort of a projector paper on top of these, and I would draw the bones or the muscles on those. So a sculpture is very, very useful in that respect. And so, you know, things like Carpeaux, there's that Carpeaux sculpture, Ugolino and his sons at the Met. The guy has the Ugolino character. The muscles are just extremely ripped, as they would say in the colloquial way. So like very deep cuts between the muscles, good separation. So it's very useful for understanding the separation and things like that. I like drawing a lot from Russian academic drawings because they have a deep knowledge of anatomy and they push that a little bit. So if you just look up, for those of you who aren't aware, if you look up Russian academic drawings on Google, you'll get. I think they're really great drafts people, like at the Rep and Academy there. What else? Carpeaux, I mean Canova, Michelangelo, as of course. Yeah, a lot of more sculptors, I would say, for the anatomy, and then from the books, like I said. And a lot of it, my lens was, yeah, more so of, you know, if any kind of image where, at least when you're learning, you want things to be very explicit, and then you can challenge yourself and look at situations where maybe there's a little bit more subcutaneous fat or the muscles aren't as clear, they're more subtle. That's a tremendous exercise. But to start, when you're still trying to wrap your head around what's where and what is what, I would start with something explicit. So I would always choose images or pieces of, you know, sculpture that where things were very clear, and that's what I would end up drawing. So, and it could be anything. Sometimes I would even just, you know, basketball players, for instance, athletes, bodybuilders, things like that. Really helpful. So we are coming to 1 o'clock. Does anybody have any final questions, things they want to ask? Okay. So I think we will end it there then. It was a pleasure being with you all this morning and early afternoon, and I hope you all have a wonderful Sunday. Okay. Yes, thank you, everyone. All right. Bye-bye.